The lights dimmed, cameras rolled, and CanYaman took a deep breath before doing something he hadn't done in years, speaking without filters. The studio was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't just another interview. It was the one where Can promised to reveal everything. And from the moment he began talking, the world realized he meant it. "People think they know me," he said, his voice calm but intense. "But they only know the version of me that's been edited for headlines." The audience leaned forward. It wasn't the usual polished, rehearsed CanYaman that fans were used to. This time, he was raw, vulnerable, and ready to expose truths that had been buried under years of speculation, rumor, and fame. The interviewer asked softly, "So, who is the real CanYaman?" He smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting both warmth and exhaustion. "He's someone who's loved deeply, lost painfully, and learned to survive under a spotlight that never turns off." Those words hit like a thunderclap. Fans watching from around the world felt it. This wasn't a media stunt. This was real. He started opening up about his love life, something he had always avoided. "When you love in public, it's no longer just between two people," he said. "Everyone feels entitled to have an opinion about it. That kind of pressure, it can destroy even the strongest bond." For the first time, he acknowledged that fame had cost him personal happiness. And though he didn't mention names, everyone knew who he meant, a story written years ago, one that still lived in the hearts of millions. Then, the interviewer asked about the rumors, the ones about his relationships on set, his chemistry with his co-stars, and the scenes that fans couldn't stop talking about. Can didn't flinch. "When you're filming something emotional, something intense," he said, "you give everything. But what people forget is that behind the camera, there's still a person who feels those emotions, even when the director says cut." The silence that followed was electric. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough. His eyes carried the weight of everything he didn't say, of moments that still lingered, of connections that never truly faded. When asked about his new look, the beard, the longer hair, the bold transformation, Can laughed softly. "It's not just a look," he said. "It's a reflection of who I am now. I'm not trying to fit into anyone's image of me anymore. I'm just being myself, finally." In that moment, it became clear, this wasn't just an interview. It was a reset. A declaration. A man reclaiming his story after years of being written by everyone else. The moment the interview aired, the internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of Can's words were spreading like wildfire across every platform. Hashtags like #CanYaman spills everything and #WorldInShock took over social media, and fans from Turkey to Italy couldn't stop talking about it. "He finally spoke," one fan wrote. "You can feel the honesty in his voice." Others said they rewatched certain parts just to understand every emotion behind his expressions, the pauses, the nervous smiles, the truth he'd been hiding for so long. Entertainment programs replayed his answers on loop. "He's not the man we thought he was," one commentator said on live TV. "This is a CanYaman who's been through heartbreak, who's been misunderstood, and who's finally ready to show his scars." The world saw the strong, confident actor, but this time, they also saw the sensitive, lonely man behind him. One question in particular caught everyone's attention. The interviewer asked, "When you talk about love that broke under pressure, are you referring to a real relationship or a role that went too far?" Can hesitated for a second, leaned forward, and replied, "Sometimes you play love until it becomes real, and sometimes real love starts to feel like a scene you can't escape." That line shattered the internet. Fans began posting old clips of him and Demet Özdemir, analyzing every smile, every glance, every behind-the-scenes video as if they were decoding a secret language. People commented things like, "Now it all makes sense," and "He's finally admitting what we always felt was real." The emotional storm was unstoppable. Meanwhile, journalists tried to dig deeper, contacting Can's closest friends for details. One of them told a magazine, "Can isn't someone who talks easily about emotions. If he's speaking like this, it means it still matters to him." That statement only added fuel to the fire. But it wasn't just love that he talked about. When asked about fame, Can got brutally honest. "You can't imagine how lonely success can be," he said. "Everyone wants something from you, attention, a story, a moment. But very few want to know how you're really doing." His voice trembled slightly, just for a moment. He continued, "You give your best to the world, and sometimes, it feels like the world only takes." That vulnerability made headlines worldwide. "CanYaman opens his heart," one Italian magazine wrote. Another Turkish outlet described it as the most honest interview of his career. The reactions weren't just from fans. Other actors praised him publicly for his courage to speak openly in an industry that often hides behind perfection. At the end of the segment, when the interviewer thanked him for being so candid, Can smiled faintly and said, "I guess it was time. I was tired of letting everyone else tell my story." That one sentence summed up everything. The world had spent years creating versions of CanYaman, the idol, the bad boy, the heartbreaker, the hero. But for the first time, the real man behind the image had spoken. And his truth left everyone silent. The next day, the entire entertainment world was still buzzing. Everywhere you looked. From morning talk shows to primetime news, people were discussing one thing: CanYaman's shocking interview. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It had turned into a cultural moment, a public reckoning with the price of fame, love, and image. The man who once symbolized perfection had just proven that even the strongest hearts can ache. Tabloids tried to twist his words, as they always do, turning honesty into scandal. Headlines screamed things like "Can admits real love on set," and "The truth behind his secret romance revealed." But those who truly listened to the interview understood that this was not about drama, it was about healing. Can had opened up not to stir the past, but to finally let go of it. In one unseen part of the interview that leaked online later, Can was asked about his rumored connection with Demet Özdemir, the one story fans never stopped believing in. He didn't deny it, but his response was careful, emotional. "Some people," he said softly, "don't leave your life when they go. They stay inside you, in ways you can't explain." That single sentence brought the internet to a standstill. Fan pages erupted with emotional edits, slow-motion clips, and tearful tributes. Comments poured in from every country. "He's still in love. This is the confession we've waited for. Demet, he's talking to you." Within hours, the topic became the #1 trending subject in both Turkey and Italy. Demet, as expected, stayed silent. She didn't post, she didn't comment, she didn't react publicly, but her silence only made the world listen harder. People began revisiting their old interviews together, moments when they laughed uncontrollably, when their eyes met and the world disappeared. For fans, those moments had never been acting, and now, it seemed Can had confirmed that belief. During another part of the interview, Can spoke about how love changes when fame gets in the way. "You stop living for yourself," he said. "Every gesture becomes a headline, every silence becomes a story. And suddenly, the person you love becomes part of your career, not your heart." His words carried the kind of sadness that comes from experience, not theory. At one point, the interviewer asked, "Would you change anything if you could go back?" Can thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "Because even the mistakes made me who I am today. I wouldn't erase the pain. I'd just handle it with more kindness." By that point, fans were crying while watching. It wasn't a celebrity talking, it was a man reflecting on life, love, and loss. Someone who had been admired by millions but understood the loneliness of being misunderstood. At the end of the segment, the interviewer said, "You seem lighter now." Can smiled, that same half-smile that fans know so well, and replied, "Maybe that's what happens when you stop pretending." The studio audience applauded, but there was no music, no outro, no performance. Just a quiet moment between a man and his truth. And that silence, that honesty, spoke louder than any headline ever could. The emotional storm that followed his words didn't calm down for days. Fans and journalists tried to process what they had just witnessed, a side of CanYaman no one had seen before. The man who once represented perfection now stood before the world as imperfect, real, and human. And somehow, that made him even more loved. International magazines couldn't stop writing about him. Italian outlets praised his sincerity, calling it a turning point in his public image. Turkish media described it as the most vulnerable moment of his career. Even Hollywood blogs picked up the story, framing him as the actor who redefined masculinity in front of millions. Behind the scenes, his team was overwhelmed. Calls from brands, producers, and directors started pouring in. Everyone wanted to work with him again. But this time, it wasn't just because of his looks or fame. It was because of what he represented, authenticity. However, while the professional world celebrated him, Ken seemed distant. Friends close to him said he was quieter than usual, spending more time alone, walking by the sea late at night. One friend revealed, he's not chasing fame right now. He's trying to make peace with his past. That past, of course, still had a name, one that he never said but everyone knew. When Demet was asked about the interview during a fashion event, she simply smiled and replied, "Everyone speaks their truth when they're ready." I'm happy he found his. Her calmness, her grace, and her silence said more than any headline could. Fans immediately noticed something else, a bracelet on her wrist that looked strikingly similar to one Ken had worn during the filming of her Kenzie cuss. That tiny detail ignited another wave of theories. Were they still in contact? Had they spoken privately after the interview? Neither of them confirmed or denied anything. But that silence only made the story more powerful. Every fan could feel it, a connection that hadn't been broken, just buried under time and distance. Meanwhile, Ken began sharing a few cryptic Instagram posts, soft sunsets, reflections of city lights, and one photo of a notebook open on a table. The caption read, "The truth will set you free, but first, it will break you." Within minutes, the post had over 1 million likes. It was clear he was no longer trying to impress anyone. He was rebuilding himself, as a man, not a myth. For the first time, the image of CanYaman wasn't about muscles, fame, or headlines. It was about emotion. His fans weren't just admiring him anymore, they were feeling him. The interviewer who sat across from him later admitted in an article, "I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, but CanYaman's honesty that night shook me." He didn't speak to defend himself, he spoke to heal. That sentence summed up the essence of what everyone had witnessed, a global star who finally dared to be vulnerable. A man who once carried the weight of the world's expectations now stood free, bruised, yes, but authentic. And somewhere between that freedom and the pain it carried, CanYaman found something even greater than fame. He found peace. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that interview refused to fade. The headlines slowed, but the emotions it stirred in people didn't. For the first time, CanYaman wasn't being talked about because of a rumor, a role, or a scandal. He was being admired for his courage. His fans said it best, he didn't just open up, he inspired millions to do the same. One evening, Ken went live on social media, something he hadn't done in years. His tone was calm, reflective. He thanked his fans for their messages, for their understanding, and for standing by him through every chapter, even the painful ones. "You've seen me through everything," he said. "The strong moments, the weak ones, the ones I wanted to hide. I'm grateful because, through you, I remembered who I really am." The live broadcast was simple, no flashy lights, no production, no PR filters. Just Ken, a cup of tea, and his raw voice reaching millions across the world. He spoke about life, about change, about how love doesn't always have to end in bitterness. When you love someone deeply, he said, that love doesn't vanish. It just changes its form. Sometimes it becomes strength, sometimes it becomes a lesson. But it never really disappears. His fans filled the comments with heart emojis, tears, and messages from every corner of the world. Italy, Spain, Brazil, Turkey, all united by a man who dared to be real in an industry built on illusion. When asked by a follower if he still believed in love, Ken smiled and replied, "More than ever. Because even when love hurts, it reminds you that you're alive." That moment was clipped and shared endlessly, turning into one of his most famous quotes to date. A few days later, he posted a photo that broke the internet again, a black and white picture of him standing by the sea at sunrise. The caption was simple: "It's time to start again." Fans interpreted it as a new beginning, both professionally and emotionally. Behind the scenes, whispers began about a new project, one he was developing himself, one that would blend fiction and truth. Rumor had it that the story was inspired by his own experiences: love, loss, self-discovery, and rebirth. Those who had read early drafts described it as his most personal work yet. Meanwhile, Demet Özdemir was asked about him in another interview. Her answer was short, sincere, and surprisingly emotional. "He's brave," she said with a soft smile. "It takes courage to speak your truth when the world expects perfection." That quote went viral too, reigniting hope in fans who still believed that destiny had one more chapter for them. Maybe not in life, but perhaps on screen, where their story first began. As the sun set on that chapter of his life, one thing became clear: CanYaman had evolved. The world no longer saw him as just an actor, but as a man who turned vulnerability into strength. The myth had transformed into a mirror, reflecting the beauty, the pain, and the truth of being human. And as his final words in that unforgettable interview continued to echo, "I'm not trying to be perfect anymore. I'm just trying to be honest." The world realized something: that honesty was his boldest look yet. Because in a world obsessed with image, CanYaman didn't just spill everything. He reminded everyone that the most powerful confession is simply being yourself.